Ambassador Gookie had never expected to spend an entire revolution on Terra, the newly discovered planet, let alone be tasked with preparing the next two Federation ambassadors for their stay. He longed to leave this place and erase it from his thoughts forever, but fate had other plans. As the two ambassadors joined Gookie on the viewing deck, he noticed the Amidian deer staring at his beak and talons with a mix of defiance and contempt, typical of the Amidian rivalry towards the Avan faction associated with Gookie's species. Kay, a sleek reptilian representing the Aurora, kept her focus on the viewport, observing the arid landscape of the human world below and the flying machines guiding their ship. The realization that he had to teach this unusual pair what he had learned the hard way filled Gookie with a sense of injustice. Why hadn't anyone guided him when he first arrived? Life was never as fair as it seemed. "Attention, please," Gookie called out. Deer continued to stare, while Kay turned her attention to him. "I know the Council paints this planet as a paradise," Gookie began, "but trust me, it is anything but. If you're lucky enough to survive the venomous creatures, the huge predators, and even the annoying mosquitoes, you'll soon learn that this is a biological hell. As for the sapient inhabitants, they may seem friendly, but they're oblivious to the dangers around them. Ask your questions now, because in 2 rotations you'll be on your own." Deer scoffed, "Our scientists say we can live here. The Avans will hate the high gravity, but that's good for the rest of us." Gookie sighed inwardly, realizing his task would be more challenging than he had anticipated. "What about you, Kay? Are the Aurora buying the Council's narrative?" he asked the reptilian, fearing his advice would fall on deaf ears again. "We are free thinkers," Ambassador, her voice filled with serenity. "The humans have proven that the place they call the African savanna has a climate similar to our home world. If you want me to believe Terra is a biological hell, I'm afraid your opinion alone is insufficient." The tentacles hanging beside Deer's mouth shortened in a display Gookie recognized as mockery. Such ingratitude nearly made him storm out of the viewing deck and report back to the Council that the new ambassadors had learned everything they needed to know, and he was ready to leave. But was their ingratitude worth tainting his impeccable work, just because he felt his advice was not being appreciated? No. "Very well then," Gookie said. "I will order the captain to take us to the African savanna so that you can see for yourself and decide if Terra is a suitable planet for your species to live on." Kay lowered her long muzzle in acknowledgement, allowing Gookie to contact the bridge and arrange a change of course with the human leadership. With the bureaucracy out of the way and the ship moving fast towards the African savanna, what followed their initial argument was an uncomfortable trip. Deer crossed as many tentacles in front of his belly in a corner, as if this whole endeavor was a waste of his time, while Gookie stayed beside the viewing port, trying to pretend the feeling was not mutual. When they were getting close to the savanna, Gookie requested the captain use the ship's sensors to find a pride of lions. "Come here." Deer Gookie broke the silence when the captain informed him he had found the pride. "I reckon this shall be enough for both of you to take my words seriously." Deer moved deliberately slow to show his lack of interest, stopping beside Kay, who was already watching the drama of life and death unfold below. "See those beasts lurking in the golden grass?" Gookie pointed his talons. "Pay attention." Through the ball-shaped viewing port on the ground, Gookie followed the pride's elegant approach as they set their sights on a lone zebra grazing near the edge of a thicket. The zebra was unaware of the danger lurking just beyond its line of sight. The lions' heads lowered, bodies fluid, communicating with subtle glances and shifts in posture like a hive mind, each member knowing their role in the dance of the hunt. The ambassador's eyes widened when the lead lioness initiated the chase with a burst of speed. Even Deer was captivated by the powerful outburst. The distance between predator and prey closed in a flash, but the zebra sensed the shift in the air and bolted, its hooves kicking up dust clouds as it sought to escape. Gookie peeked at Kay only to find the reptilian tiptoeing as she bent forward, her tense body hinting at the end of her serene demeanor. On the ground, the pursuit went on relentlessly. The zebra weaved through the grasses, its stripes blurring with each desperate turn. The lions kept pressing on, flanking their target as their muscles burned with exertion. The lead lioness pounced, and there was a moment of intense struggle where dust rose, then only stillness descended. Deer and Kay exchanged a look, but nothing was said. "Do you understand now?" Gookie said. "If you treat this place as if it is your planet just because of the familiar climate, this is the fate that awaits you. Just because you cherry-picked a predator in a place where few humans live doesn't mean the planet is the biological hell you claim. I will stay in another biome, and Kay will need a fence if she chooses to stay away from the cities." "That's all," Deer retorted. Gookie was speechless at Deer's stupidity, giving time for Kay to speak. I won't leave the safety of the city. The humans never mentioned you could be eaten alive here. My species needs to hear word of this. Seeing at least one of the two ambassadors was not a lost cause gave Gookie the motivation to continue his lecture. Safety? I was in a city when I almost died for the first time. I was trying my wings against the local gravity when they tired, and I landed on a tree. Gookie paused, reliving the traumatic moment and adding emotion to his voice. My talons had barely touched the wood when one of the dead branches came to life and pounced at me with two fangs. I was lucky it only reached my feathers because later I discovered that those fangs were hollow, full of poison. Can you believe this planet? A naturally evolving needle. His overly enthusiastic speech captured the attention of the trainee ambassadors, but instead of the desired effect, Gookie realized he came off as crazy by their reactions. The dead branch came to life and attacked you? What are you going to say next? Living rocks, perhaps. A river that flows uphill? Deer glanced at Kay. Gravity might have caused him to topple over and land on his head. Gookie snapped, feeling his frustration rise. We shouldn't dismiss Gookie after what he's shown us, Kay said. The sensible path forward is to investigate the planet and avoid the trees. If there is such a species that attacks you from the branches, we must prepare countermeasures. You know nothing, Gookie said, trying not to sound crazy. You can avoid the trees, but the snakes slither on the ground, on the branches, in every possible crevice. Even if you spot them early, some species spit venom over long distances, and believe it or not, they aim for your eyes. Only silence followed this declaration, with both trainee ambassadors exchanging a long gaze. Deer was the first to break the silence. What is this, a tactic to scare us? It looks to me that you want us to stay indoors, so that our work here will look inferior to yours when our term ends. I will not say I fully believe you, Gookie said, but your words warrant at least the benefit of the doubt. I will stay indoors until I can either confirm or deny your claims with the help of the humans. You are naive, Gookie said. The humans don't help. Or rather, they think they help, but they only make things worse. What they do is minimize the risks and let you feel brave like a fool. You won't last a week on the ground. Besides, you are wrong to assume you're safe indoors. There are venomous insects everywhere, and they are not afraid to crawl through the gaps between doors and windows. On Terra, a moment of distraction means death. Preposterous, Deer scoffed. The world you're describing cannot be real, or else you wouldn't have survived an entire revolution on the ground. I barely survived, Gookie said. There were moments I'd rather forget. A small insect the humans call a bee stung my tongue in my first month here, and it nearly killed me. But looking back, this is what saved me. After I was stung, I never opened the windows again, and only the incident that kept happening was finding 8-legged insects in my bathroom. The humans removed them, but they would always say that if I was to live in fear like that, it would be better not to leave the ship. They are right. Not leaving the ship is better, Deer said, the tentacles beside his mouth shortening again. I always knew the Avans were cowards, but to have one of you admitting that Terra might be a paradise indeed. Gookie took a deep breath, nearly snapping. He was trying to help by sharing his experience, and look what he got in return, being called a coward, along with his species. The thought of grabbing Deer's tentacles with his talons and ripping them off with his beak crossed his mind. The Amidians could regenerate them later, so losing a few might not be such a problem. Kay's hands touched her muzzle, as if smelling the rising tension. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Seeing the apprehension in her eyes helped Gookie rein in his emotions. Still, this was insufficient to prevent him from stooping to Deer's level. You think you can do better than me? The biomes your species love are no different from the rest of the planet, a biological hell. I bet my eye you are all talk, and you won't last a week on the ground. If you are as stupid as it seems, you won't even get a chance to quit. Whether he was pretending or not, Deer seemed confident. My species rules over life forms from swamps, lakes, and wetlands. This is true on our home world and every other world that the Federation allows us. Terra will be no different. Very well then, Gookie said. We can go to the Amazon rainforest right now, and you can test your skills against the little anacondas, alligators, and piranhas. Gookie was using rhetoric to prove his point, but to his surprise, Deer accepted the challenge. Good. The ship smells like feathers, and my skin could use fresh water. Kay's eyes widened. This is unwise, Ambassador. We are going to the Amazon River. Gookie was tired of arguing with Deer. If he desired a closer view of the surface, Gookie would allow it. When was a better moment to let his Amidian colleague learn the hard way than now that he was here to watch? Gookie contacted the bridge and let them deal with the bureaucracy for yet another change of course. What followed was another short trip with Gookie and Deer standing on opposite sides of the viewing deck, as Kay kept commenting on what she saw on the ground in a futile attempt to lighten the mood. When the captain informed Gookie that they had arrived, he made another request. This time he wanted to find a place full of alligators so that Deer would see their teeth. Hopefully, watching their violence as the mosquitoes consumed him alive would be enough for Deer to understand Terra was not like any other planet of the Federation. Their ship quickly scanned the surface for a positive match, and not long after, the captain announced that the ramp at the back of the ship was ready to be used, having contacted the dry portion of the shore of an oxbow lake. As if he had something to prove, Deer took the lead, leaving the viewing deck behind to descend the ramp, marching to the surface. Although Kay didn't share his enthusiasm, she still followed him out of the ship. Unlike the others, Gookie intentionally lagged behind, his eyes scanning the grainy shore as his brain weighed the risk of stepping beyond the ramp. The possibility of going any further than a single step onto the shore hadn't crossed his mind. The shores were littered with bones and debris from creatures that got too close to the water. Deer and Kay reached the ground fast, but only the former was foolish enough to approach the murky green water, where shadows of massive alligators glided silently, only their eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. "Don't enter the water," Ambassador the female reptilian warned him, even faster than Gookie. "Look at those eyes and snouts poking above the surface. I don't need to see them hunting to know what will happen when you disturb the water. You underestimate my intellect." Kay Deer's tone was calm. "These kinds of instinct-driven beasts exist on all worlds. Those seem to be the kind that cannot be tamed nor confronted on water, but they can be easily avoided on land. I mean, look how clumsy their walk is." Still standing on the ramp, Gookie was flabbergasted by how Deer kept advancing along the shore. If not for the cloud of mosquitoes flying around the Amidian, who was trying to hide his discomfort, he might have believed Deer was enjoying his trip in this hellish environment. Suddenly, Deer halted his pace close to what looked like a puddle of water that connected to the lake. Unlike the deep waters where the alligators floated lazily, this puddle seemed to contain something different. "Look at that. There's a fish here," Deer said. "Those flattened head ones are always friendly." Deer was reaching the water with one of his lateral tentacles when Gookie's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of something he didn't recognize in the puddle. But why should he worry? He knew the Amidians could just regrow their tentacles effortlessly, so a lost limb would be just a cheap lesson for such a fool. What happened, however, was much more than Gookie could have foreseen. When he touched the creature, Deer's tentacle was not torn out, nor was he forced to remove it because of poison. Instead, his whole body contorted violently, causing him to fall as the remaining tentacles contracted all at once, his face recoiling into awkward rigid angles. If the alligators were to move now, their meal would be assured. What is happening? Kay was equally puzzled. Long moments passed before Gookie's brain dared to come up with a hypothesis. "Looks like he's being electrocuted." The unusual situation ensured that Gookie's reaction was slow, but after he took his own hypothesis seriously, he ignored his fear and rushed to Deer's rescue. Not daring to touch the contorting Amidian, Gookie began grabbing rocks and sticks he found around and throwing them at the snake-like creature that he could barely see through the mud. It took many attempts to scare away the animal. Only after being hit in the head by a stone did it disappear into the waters. As Gookie recovered his breath, Kay approached and took Deer's tentacle from the water. "He's alive," Kay said. Gookie ignored the information. "Electricity in a fish?" Gookie saw the realization strike Kay as her eyes widened. He knew exactly what she was feeling. An exchange of looks was enough for him to notice that no more convincing would be needed for her to believe that the planet was a biological hell. Time passed quickly after that. The crew rescued Deer, and when he woke up, Kay had already quit her job as ambassador. Deer didn't apologize, nor did he change his opinion about the Avens, but he also quit moments after understanding why he had lost consciousness. Gookie's report to the council was detailed, but he still struggled to explain how the two ambassadors had quit after only hours had passed since their arrival. His solution was to blame the humans for their lack of understanding of how horrible their planet was, but he didn't forget to mention that they were the friendliest sapiens he'd ever found. When the long-awaited day of his departure came, Gookie was certain that the council would let him take the fall, and he would never work for the Federation again. But several days later, when he was already enjoying the safety of his planet, the most surprising piece of news found its way into his nest. Terra had been demoted from a paradise world to the newly created status of a biological death world, a planet with a good climate and gravity, but filled with deadly life forms throughout its surface. And that was not all. Gookie had been appointed as the first director of the Containment Department, a subsection of the Federation that would be solely responsible for ensuring that no non-sapient species ever leaves Terra's atmosphere by accident.